My name is Christian Stensrud. I'm head of corporate governance services at Transcend Group.
And my name is Heidi Glise-Hylleborg, and I am also a consultant at Transcend Group and CEO of the Danish branch of the Transcend Group.
We would like to thank Stockholm FinTech Week to asking us to come and talk about corporate governance and culture. So this is what this presentation is going to be about. Corporate governance is the set of processes, customs, policies, laws, and institutions affecting the way a company is directed, administrated, and controlled. Corporate governance also includes the relationships among the many stakeholders involved and the goals for which the company is governed. Principal stakeholders are the shareholders, management, and the board of directors. Other stakeholders are workers, customers, creditors, banks, suppliers, regulators, and also the community at large. We have tried here to kind of make a figure of the corporate governance model. There are different models, differ to where in the world we are. We have the Anglo-American model that tends to emphasize the interests of the shareholders. And we have the continental European model that is a multi-stakeholder model that also recognizes the interests of the workers, the managers, suppliers, customers, and the community. There is not one corporate governance model. The system differs from one organization to another. Literature points to no one definition of a governance system, nor what makes one system different from another. Political and regulatory factors may play a role in addition to basic factors such as social structure and level of character of the economic development. However, once a governance system has acquired its character, it rarely changes significantly in the organization. FinTech firms need to manage many of the same risks as big FS companies, and FinTech firms are held to an equal standard as regulated firms. At the end of the day, managing risk is at the same core as of financial service, and FinTech isn't excluded from this. Customers to FinTech expect real-time responses to their requests, which means that risk management must be able to assess risks automatically. But then the question is, who is defining the risk parameters? We also often see that FinTech companies' technology may be cutting edge, but the investment in cybersecurity measures is nowhere as much as traditional banks are spending. In many cases, if a traditional banks get a security hit, it can deal with the fallout. But if a FinTech firm gets a hit, it can be over for the whole business. The whole business premise is built upon transacting quickly and safely online. So there is little doubt that much of the innovation in the financial service space is being driven by the FinTech companies, and that sound risk management will be the heart of its success. Whichever route FinTech firms decides to take, to either challenge the existing players or facilitate them, they are bound by the same risk management and regulatory compliance issues that traditional banks and insurance need to abide by. A FinTech firm in the FS sector is expected to attain the same level of assurance around the risk inherent in its business, operation, products, and service. So, How is the current state of corporate governance in many companies across sectors? Well, they still often have a silo approach, which with a lot of internal rules and regulations. I guess that's one of the reasons why traditional banks creates an organization on the outside when developing new services, like Swish in Sweden, Mobile Pay in Denmark, and Vipps in Norway. This may be because the new organization is not bound by all the rules and regulation and hierarchy, and can be more agile in their governance. If an ID has to be run by the risk manager, legal department, and the compliance department, the good ID may well be stopped. So what are some of the risk trends we see that has an impact on the governing models in the financial service? First of all, we see increasing regulatory requirements. For example, for a mid-sized Nordic bank with simple products, we have seen over 1,000 legal requirements. At the same time, we see a change in supervision. There is an increasing expectation from authorities like the FED, EIB, World Bank to have an efficient supervision of, for example, money laundering and consumer protection. And the authorities' data tools for monitoring and analyzing the sector is becoming better and better. The next is cost reduction. Compliance and risk management have been a big cost and have in several cases slowed the speed of innovation. The cost awareness of these functions will have a higher attention. And something to think about is what part of the risk management and compliance can be digital. So here is possible to cut costs. Even with more regulations and more risk management and compliance, we have often scandals in the FS sector. So we will probably still see increased pressure from politicians and customers and citizens on the financial institutions to have a higher standard of moral and ethics. Innovation is also required. Digital and mobile tools help realize an organization's strategic objects, but the same real-time technologies also present a risk because they can be difficult to control and people feel overwhelmed with data. So it's important to remember that data is a double-edged sword. It's required and expected. However, it is a risk if it does not have the proper quality. So, where is corporate governance going? The focus is actually shifting at many levels and in most sectors. The need for change is also being driven by the experience gained from the year 2020 with the COVID-19. We have seen that silo-based governance with a lot of internal rules and regulation made it more difficult to change quickly how to operate when it was a lockdown from one day to another. With the traditional silo model, the new ways of working had to be aligned with internal rules and regulations, and this took time. The companies that had a more agile and principle-based governance structure were in a better position to reorganize to the new operating model that had to come to place when everyone was working at home and not at the office. But to have a principle-based governing model, it is important to have a sound company culture. And now I'll hand over the presentation to Heidi, who will talk a little bit more about the culture aspect of governance.
Culture and the importance of establishing or evolving a good culture in an organization. And this is based upon my 15 years in working with compliance and risk management in the financial service sector, where I have experienced what Christian has been talking about, the change in the regulatory environment, in the internal processes of effectively manage risk, and establish compliance and risk management functions and processes. I have learned on my past 15 years experience that we cannot only look at the data when we make our decisions in the organizations. We really have to consider the organizational culture. And the reason why we brought organizational culture to you today is to understand that why to have our point of view, saying we believe that it will be the core of a corporate governance program going forward to meet the increasing complex risk pictures that we expect to see. So let's just start with the definition here. What is an organizational culture? So culture is defined as a set of values and symbols and rituals shared by employees in a specific organization. This describes the way that things are done in order to solve business challenges and problems, both internally, but also in relating to customers, suppliers, and business environment. Or put it simply, culture is the behavior in an organization which influences how employees act, see, feel, and believe. And I will get back to why this is important for our decision making. So in line with what Christian talked about on executing corporate governance effectively, organization needs to know how and understand the ways the culture influences these business processes. Because employees are people, and people exhibit both good and bad behaviors. They have different values, they have different ways of working, and they have different ways of adhering to authorities, regulations, and etc. So culture in an organization may also vary from one department to another department, or from one business unit in another business unit. There are several studies of what culture really constitutes, and it has been studied for many years. And one of the most recognized one is Gerhard Hofstad's 10-year study of where he actually found 6 types of cultural dimensions. So this is an organization hierarchy, as you probably know it, and a classical one of how decisions are made in a hierarchy of authority. And now I put the classical first and second line, which we know from the financial service sector. Perhaps not all of you have heard of the 3 lines of defense model, but it is a recognized model used in the financial service sector to organize that who is owning the risk, who is managing the risk, and who is controlling and reporting back to the board of directors. The 3 lines of defense model, is normally not one that is practiced in smaller fintech organizations, especially not in the beginning, because then you have the CEO, who might also is the CRO, and then you probably have a head of legal who will definitely also do some compliance and some risk work, and there's a lot of hats to put on each of the different person. But as the organization grows, we see more and more fintechs also moving towards the 3 lines of defense. So in the 3 lines of defense, or in a typical hierarchy of authority, the board of directors has this responsibility to practice good governance, which generally includes working to develop a healthy corporate culture. It may sound in theory good. However, it's our experience that culture can be really hard to define, and it can be even more difficult to put into practice. Let me show you why. The true culture is the shared habits of a company. So behavior creates behavior, then it creates habits, and then it creates the culture. So having a mission and a vision of a desired culture in a company is not actually having a culture. So culture, as I said before, is different from every organization and even in every department. So we as human beings are biased. By default, our brain chooses the easiest, fastest, less risky route unless we have a big reward in front of us. These choices in fact defining our personal comfort zone, except for very repetitive tasks where there is a really high precision and safety that we will hit the target every time. So get into a good habit of questioning shared belief, attributes, assumptions, routines, and unreflected decision making on a regular basis is actually one of the things that moves the culture and define the culture and makes it integrated. So doing change in an organization, which a fintech normally experience every day, evolving their business from one person to 50 persons. Change new behaviors actually in these times of change, new behaviors becomes vital. So practices these behaviors until they become a shared routine and an actual habit. More or less, fake it until you become it is a good learning. And this is what we actually see in new fintech companies. They basically start with the culture and with the shared feeling of developing and doing something together. Habits and behaviors and motivations are key to achieve the best results in organizations. And when working on these factors, we see that transformation is actually becoming really resistant in corporations. So there are so many good benefits of getting this organizational chart that I have showed you here in place. This is when you talk about culture, this is a classic picture. So it tells us how many different ways of culture and behaviors that there actually is in an organization. So organizations are often not aware, or even some choose to ignore, that 90% of organizational culture is underneath the surface. 90%. So the risk is that leaders may make decisions based on 10% of what's visible to them. None of the visible organizational culture will make sense if the organization do not understand the invisible culture and the drivers beneath that. So let me give you an example. Have you ever been part of implementing a new IT system or user platform? If you have, you know that IT people love the specifications, and as they are experts in the field, they're ready to be able to translate it into the newest gadget will make them able to do that. The problem is that the general user doesn't find it attractive. Neurologically, our new IT system is a change that causes strain and stress to our human brain. It's something that requires an extra effort. Imagine that understanding an IT system is like walking through a jungle on an already existing path, instead of having to cut down a new one with a machete. Users would find it tiresome to create a new way of doing the same task within a new technology framework. The brain is lazy and it will try to use as much as the existing path as it can. It doesn't yet see what it can actually achieve with this new technology. And all other words trying to explain this are understood in the language of the old technology. So this is an example that shows how important it is to understand the conscious behavior and the unconscious behavior when making a change. So we have here a suggestion of how you can actually get started in your organization. It is a big journey to evolve your culture, and you must give it time. You must grow the maturity of your organizational culture in phases, considering the nature of your business. But you should get started, and it's our recommendation that you actually get started as the first thing you do when you hire your CEO. So get into his ideas on what is the desired business culture that you would like to have here in this organization. And many of you have perhaps seen and understood the importance of always starting with the why. Why are we even here as an organization? Why are we even here as a company? So it is crucial that your business culture reflects your why. But you must also, if you start in a bit larger organization, you must understand the current culture. So understand the current culture and then make sure that you find the desired culture. You business leaders should closely examine current business processes step by step to identify which practices are aligned with the desired culture and which do not entail the desired culture that it has and should be either changed or removed, and which one that has the desired culture. We have seen in other European countries like the Netherlands that culture audits is a way to go forward in these times. So it is a possibility to start with a culture audit if you start to evolve your culture. The culture audit will actually is a specific audit technique that is based where the auditor is based upon interviews and observations, analyzed in a specific method, ensuring that the result of the audit has that objectivity that it requires to say something valid about the culture. And then the business leaders also have the data to base your decision on. Another thing where you should get started after having defined your desired culture is, of course, to promote the strong and specific culture, which means business managers must strike a choir with their employees to speak about their emotions, establish the connections, makes everyone share the same purpose and motivation from the top to the bottom. And then you must, of course, take responsibility. This is first and foremost the managers that needs to take the responsibility to shape the culture, be a role model, and it must be strengthened throughout measuring the culture and make the managers actually account for the fact that the culture is moving in the direction as desired. When you have established your basics, basically, our recommendation would be to make sure that you integrate it into the core of the business. Like Christian just talked about, This is the same thing that we always recommend with corporate governance, and which we also recommend with risk management. It is being integrated into the business's processes, and it's being dealt with upon decision making as you go along. So one way you can start in your integration phase is actually looking into your remuneration processes. Often remuneration program supports the economic and the strategic results, and less frequently they actually include what it means when these allow through which ways these results are actually achieved. Here, HR is a good function to include. Compliance could actually also be a good function to include if you have these functions in your daily work. It could also be an external help in these matters. But it is important that many organizations build their teams to better communicate the leader's version of the desired culture. When integrating into the business, it's very important to understand the natural involvement of these steps. So just like Kirsten talked about, corporate culture is a continually work in progress, and economical and technical forces are more and more requiring change for how organizations functions. So the future is in many aspects uncertain, and the only thing that the board of directors can count on is that major issues will affect the operations and will continue to evolve in various ways. And here it is so important that upon these changes, that the right set of cultural behaviors, attributes, may be the ones that are spoke about as in a role model situation. But also, on the other hand, that management actually do account for the undesired behaviors and act upon them, rectify them, and speak also about the things that you do not want to see in your culture. We can only recommend in this stage to make sure that you have a secure speak up process. It's very important that you promote a secure and a sound speak up process. So we do see that whistleblowing processes is becoming a legal requirement for organizations of a certain size. And many actually implement his whistleblower challenge as a tick in the box, which we think is sad, basically, because they can give you much data and they can support you in action in your evaluation and involvement of your culture. So 5 years down the line, you have a culture, you have the basics in place, it's well integrated into the core of the business, it's lived by the people, as we talked about, it's actually becoming the natural behavior for your employees. I think that's where you can start saying, now we see that it is integrated. You should start optimizing your culture for getting the real value creation. You might seen value creation on your journey towards here, and that would be a good thing, which you definitely should celebrate, but don't stop optimizing your culture. Through our many years of experience in governance, risk management, and compliance, and have seen and lived and been a part of the corporate scandals and regulatory transformations, we know how that healthy corporate culture increases the actual ability to transform, increase productivity, and generates a positive long-term shareholder value. And there is a reason why we're seeing regulators in the EU now placing more and more responsibility on the organizations to actually emphasize sustainable growth. So there will be new regulations coming out where it is important that business leaders can grow sustainable. And we know that organizations with weak cultures actually will find it really difficult to grow sustainable. Then a final note. An organization is not equal to what Christian just said about corporate governance. Unfortunately, if we could give you a tick in the box or a one-size-fits-all, it would be a joyful ride. But this is not the case. So culture is not a one-size-fits-all. You cannot copy-paste from another organization. You need to integrate it, make your own opinion about what you want, what type of culture you want, and then work with it, integrate it, and optimize it. And here again, culture audits is actually a part of the supervising authorities in the Netherlands as in these days, and has been for 10 years. An example that we were giving from our colleagues in the Netherlands is that the supervisors actually hired a psychologist to perform these audits. And in the beginning, people were laughing about this. But now people are starting to get used to it and actually starting to see the true value of working with the culture. And it is when you're in your optimized state that we think that it is sound and healthy for you to basically communicate to external stakeholders about your products and about your brand in order to be in line with what you have developed. So thank you for listening.